we are looking at a really interesting subject here, which is we are talking about families and food, and particularly how we can get the family food dynamic. Yeah, that's right one. How we can get the family food dynamic to help power healthier food. And what we did, I'm going to give you a little introduction to the work that we've been doing, and then there's going to be a really good panel on this. There we go. How can we support families to come together over food in better, more positive, and ultimately healthier ways? The question we asked ourselves at the beginning of the year. And in order to answer that question, we did two things, which was we did quite a lot of different kind of surveys. In particular, we have the big VegPower survey of 3,000 parents and 3,000 kids that we asked lots of questions about family dynamics in that. We did a big review of the evidence, and we put together a task force of people who helped us put that together. Lots of people in the task force are here today. So if you're on that task force, can I ask you to hold your hand up so you can take a bit of glory? You were there for half of it. Come on, let's see that hand up. Clearness was on it. These guys all helped us out. We had retail, we had government, we had nutritionists, we had chefs, we had lots of different people involved. And we are going to be publishing a report next week about what we found out and the thoughts that we have on this issue. But I'm going to give you guys a sneak preview and really just the best bits in that report now. Okay, this is a report, out next week. That's what the cover will look like. Well, okay, actually, let me rewind a spot. If I can figure out how to do these buttons, I can't. Here we go, yeah. We went into this with two things we thought were true. The first thing we thought were true is that maybe families aren't eating together as much as they used to, and that was a bit of a problem that we might want to think about as a society of how we can fix. The second thing we assumed is that when people eat together as a family, they eat healthier meals, right? As it turns out, that both those things turned out to be completely untrue. Let me find out what we found out. So, in terms of frequency of family meal times, what we discovered here is that the average family is having 5.2 family meal times per week. Now, what we did discover from this process, excuse me to get my glasses, is that maybe some people have some different definitions of what a family meal time looks like. We tried to help define it for them, but we noticed that some people might view that quite differently, and that's something we need to dig into a bit more. But what we saw, and you can see in the figures here, is that there's about 24% of our kids who are just not really coming together in a family structure, even if it's just sort of one adult family structures, in a way that brings families together around food, and that's a concern. But what isn't true is the idea that people aren't eating together. People are eating together a lot, right, by some definition of eating together. We asked some questions about what kind of barriers people might be facing in terms of eating together. And I think what was quite interesting with this is that, if you look here, it's probably too small for you guys to read. These first two are really kind of life management issues. It's about conflicting work schedules, conflicting school and after-school activity schedules. It's kind of a practical stuff that I don't think us at VegPower are in a position to do anything about, or particularly want to do about. I mean, it might be an argument about how we change the way we work and go to offices and things like that, but that's way beyond our remit. But those made up the biggest ones. If we look further down, quite interesting was the table. There's a whole section there about tables in this one, because tables is always a popular one, isn't it? Whenever we do a brainstorm about families and food, about who's got a table. We found out that 13% of people in the UK don't have a table. That climbs to 25% amongst people who are on a lower income. It does have a marginal impact on how frequently they have a family meal, and it has absolutely no impact on the amount of vegetables their children consume, which we consider to be a proxy for diet generally. There's lots of detail in this when we push the report out. We also found out, that 73% of the meals that kids are eating at a family meal occasion is a home-cooked meal. And again, we realise there's very, very different definitions of what a home-cooked meal might mean. It distinctly is not a ready meal. We classified that differently. But some people may consider a home-cooked meal to be pulling something ultra-processed out of the freezer and sticking it in the air fryer and serving it up without any vegetables, which is a home-cooked meal. It's just not the kind of healthy home-cooked meal that we might wish to see. We wanted to also find out, how do people feel about meal times? Are they just like a battle zone? or are they a joy? And this was really interesting. This is when the kind of really interesting stuff started to open up about really understanding what's going on here. Is that what we did in the thing is we asked 3,000 parents to give us 3 words they associate with a family meal. And then we asked them to give a sense of what they felt about those 3 words in terms of how positive their words are, which is not a method I've used before, but it's quite interesting. You can see here we've got a word cloud. Now, 9,000 words. 84% of those words were positive. Only 15% of respondents had anything negative to say about family meals, which I thought was really interesting. But the thing that massively stands out is the idea of togetherness, of bonding. That the family meal is the point at which the family come together more than anything else, and it is extremely precious to parents. And I think any of us who's had families can relate to that, right? It's kind of sacrosanct, right? It's the really most important part of the day is when you all come together. And I think what we can take from that is where there is such a strength of feeling around togetherness and bonding, I think it's reasonable fair to say that there will be a strong aversion to anything that jeopardizes that sense of togetherness and bonding and harmony. And this is a key theme that really came out of the research for us. Okay, and the danger is, the thing that we need to understand as people who want to get into that conversation, try and influence that conversation, is if we come in looking like something that might jeopardize happiness and harmony around the family meal table, then it's going to be much, much harder for whatever it is that we or any of you are suggesting that people do, that they do them. Now, here's the thing. Do family meal times promote healthier diets? And so this little graph here, we've got those children in that critical zone, that 0 to 1, that 34% of our kids who really got to keep vegetable consumption. Then this one is the inadequates, 64% who are 2 or less, and then the others. What you can notice is that the amount of meals they're eating together has absolutely no impact at all, according to our data, on how many vegetables these kids are eating. Family meal times are neither infrequent or effective when it comes to getting kids to eat more veg. We were absolutely wrong on both the assumptions we had from going into this, which actually shows that research is worthwhile. Fantastic. There is lots of data here, but it'll be easy to read when the report comes out, right? So it's probably too small for you to see, so I'll give you a bit of just a quick view of this. Across all these kind of classic socio-demographic segments, age of the child, socioeconomic, income, parent structure, these kind of things, we see really, really just very, very small movements on those things. The thing that's interesting, which we keep seeing, is actually the average and the lower income brackets, and the C1 and C2s are much more closely aligned, and actually it's the posh rich people, it's the ABs earning over 60 grand a year who tend to be sort of pulling out. But really the point that's really interesting is here. Can you guys see these numbers? Yeah, great, okay. So what we see is where children are deemed to be fussy. Now, the way we do this, the way we calculate this, is we don't ask parents, is your child fussy? Because I think every parent say, God, yes. What we ask is a series of questions about their willingness to try new food, or they don't generally like things at first. These sorts of questions are a bit softer, but they give us a really good window into creating a sort of fussiness sense for that child, and allows us to classify them as high fussy, low fussy, or average. What we see here is a massive differentiator of vegetable consumption, a 40-point differentiator when it comes to this concept of fussiness. So for me, this, and we've talked about it before, parental role modeling, everything else, all the kind of income things and socio-demographic things and geographical things, we see little bits of movement. But if you talk about the parent's diet, or you talk about this idea of fussiness, is when we see the biggest movements. And these might be awkward places to go, but there are places that we simply cannot afford to ignore. I got to say, and also, if you sit and have a chat with some parents, you start hearing, oh, they're just so fussy, or they used to be fine, they used to eat this, they used to eat that, and now they don't, I don't know what's happened. And these are the real world problems that the audience we want to talk to are caring about. Okay, I wanted to add one last bit onto this thing. There is a really excellent report which I posted up on social the other day. I recommend that everybody should read because it is thankfully short, concise, and to the point, and doesn't use long, complicated words I don't understand, which is a joy for me in academic papers. It's called Determinants of Vegetable Food Choice in Families with Limited Food Budgets in England. Needs a better name. A focus group study. What they'd looked at, we sat down with a bunch of parents and talked to them about special offers and promotions. And we're at a bit of a time now, as Hugh mentioned earlier on. You know, Wes Streeting has said that actually we're going to let the supermarkets get on with it. It's kind of, I feel like he's told the supermarkets they're the guardians of the nation's health, and that you know somehow how to fix this, so just get on with it, and somehow by magic you'll do it. But anybody who's spent much time working in retail knows that things like, you know, the classic levers of price and promotion and discounts, they generally only have a short-term effect. And this report really pulls that out, that actually, and where it gets to points which I think are interesting. I'm going to read this quote. Most public health initiatives aiming to enable children and parents to buy and eat more vegetables, whether through media campaigns, price reductions, or choice architecture in supermarkets, are in effect asking parents to invest money, time, and effort and culinary confidence in preparing and cooking more vegetables. This ask has risks attached. Right? And what you'll find is if you are somebody who's really at the bottom of our income scale, the idea you might try another vegetable, right, introduces into your life a lot of stress, a lot of friction, a lot of risk that you probably do not have the capacity to handle. If you're giving people a discount on core veg, what this report picks out, which we've seen elsewhere, is what you actually see is not people buying more veg, but people using that money they saved to buy other things inside their basket. So although I think that discounts and promotions actually have a really important part to play, the idea that by slashing carrots down to 8p, we're going to change the nation is, in my opinion, absolute nonsense, a really bad turn. And I would suggest everybody reads this report. Frankly, it's only about a 10, 15-minute read. We have to do a lot more than just do cheaper prices. But we've got a few supermarkets in the room today, so they may have some interesting opinions on that. But we shall see. Okay, at that point, I'm going to pass over to Hugh. And could I ask our first panel, which is Glynis and Claire and Kirsty, who I think is here somewhere, and Bimpy, to come up and grab a seat. And I'll leave you with Hugh.
Great. So, we have a panel to drill into this question of how we're going to make it easier for families at home to get more veg inside their kids. I'd love you each to introduce yourself, and we'll go from there. Can I start, Bimpy, with you? Please tell us who you are and what you do.
Hi, I'm Bimpy Oki. I'm a consultant in public health in Lambeth.
Hello, I'm Claire Holly, and I'm a senior lecturer at Loughborough University. My research hinges on improving children's eating.
Hello, is it on? Yep. Hello, I'm Kirsty Sadler from IGD, the Institute of Grocery Distribution, so an institute with a commercial side, but also a charitable impact side, running programmes across the whole food system, and I'm Director for Sustainability and Health. Thanks. And I'm Glynis, I'm from the Association for Nutrition, and we're there to try and help to make sure that the public can have access to safe, effective, evidence-based nutrition information to provide that safety net for them.
Well, I'll start with you, Glynis, because you're right next to me and you've got to the crux of what we're trying to do in this session. And Dan's report has talked about the stress that parents are under, and that there's a gap between this desire to have family harmony and all the good intentions of getting their kids to eat more veg. You go along with that?
Yeah, I think we've got to accept, you know, parenting's hard. It's not easy. There's so many demands. You've got the pressures of time, finances, everything that's going on, and you come together for a meal and you want harmony. You want it, and actually, as good as our intentions are, actually people will take the easier route to avoid that conflict and have that pleasant time. And that means that actually the reality is that sometimes nutrition will take a step back. so that they can be the peacekeeper at that time.
So you're particularly professionally involved with helping parents access things that are going to be useful. That means things that are going to help keep the peace, as well as great easy recipes and easy wins in the kitchen and stuff like that. But what we know is that only 14% of parents say they even attempt to search for advice and good tips on helping their children to eat more veg. Do you see ways of just simply increasing that rather alarming low number and getting to connect more people with good advice that also addresses the harmony issue, doesn't scare them off, doesn't create that extra anxiety and stress, and yet helps them achieve the goal of healthy eating for their family?
Yeah, I think is that better for you? I think it's about meeting parents where they are, going to where they are. Where are they looking for that advice, that information? And it might not be about nutrition, but what we can do is actually go into those conversations and then bring nutrition into those, showing them ways that actually we can avoid conflict and actually bring more fun and enjoyment to those. And therefore, actually, by having fun and enjoyment, you're dealing with other parts of the stress that are there, but bringing nutrition into that. So it's a really nice way to come to them in their platform, talking to them in their language, and giving them those tips to help them come. So then they might think about nutrition.
So a promise of positivity at the outset of any good advice about diet, before you even get to the nitty-gritty of how you might do it.
Yeah, people don't want to be lectured. They don't want to be told, oh, you should be doing this, you should be that. It's about connecting with them, having stories, building that relationship with them so they can trust you. And part of that is telling them that you're going to help them to have a fun, enjoyable environment, and you're not going to be adding to that stress or that conflict.
Bimpy, I just want to ask you about the place of working with schools in this. I mean, this session is focused on the family and at home and on how we can help parents do that. But one thing we know is it's actually very hard to reach people at home. It's very hard to reach people and influence the way they parent and things that happen at home. We do, positively on the other hand, we know that there are huge opportunities at school to influence kids about food, not least if we put good food in front of them every day at school. That's a great start. Tell us about some of the work you've done in Lambeth, and do you think there is a bit of take-home goodness that goes with the work that you can do in school that actually helps us achieve what Glenys has been talking about and give parents the sense of positivity that this isn't necessarily going to be hard because school is helping me do it?
Yeah, so thank you, Glenys. I think it's really important to understand it's very important to understand the environment in which our families live. And absolutely, I think most families will tell you what's good for their child. So for the many years we've been in public health telling people that it's important that they feed their children well is probably the worst advice we've given people because they know that already, and actually we've made life worse for them. I think we have opportunities to see how do we support families, and as you said, schools are a place where our children spend quite a lot of time. They're also probably in an environment where they've got their peers that can encourage them, and they're probably a bit better behaved at school than at home. And so I think one of the things we've tried to do over the years is to see how can we work with schools, also recognizing, I mean, we talked about parents and families under a lot of pressure, but more recently we do recognize that our schools have been put in charge of being responsible for a whole load of things. So the approach again is how can we support schools to enable them support the children? And again, just telling schools what to do is not often the best way to do this. What we have done is to see, well, what are the things schools are doing at the moment? What's important to them? What do they need to be achieving? And how do we work with them to support them to be able to achieve these, but also embed some of the messages and the approaches that we want them to take. And I haven't been paid by VegPower in any way, but I think because I think we were one of the first local authorities that decided that actually we wanted VegPower in our schools, was the fact that we could see the sorry, I've used the word potential again, sorry, Dan, but the opportunities to really look at how can we make food fun for the children, but also helpful to enable the staff to deliver on the curriculum. And so we have been involved in different programs alongside VegPower, looking at things like edible gardens. And it's not just been for the children, but it's also, one of our schools, for instance, over the summer was open, the gardens, the edible gardens were open to parents, and they got the letter saying, come in at any time, you know, come and tend the gardens, come and take some of the produce over the summer. And it's really that connection, and it ticks a lot of the boxes for the schools, both in terms of the curriculum, but also engaging with parents as well. And I think, again, it's the reinforcement. It's not just one approach. It's actually, trying out different approaches and that reinforcement.
So that interplay between teachers and the parents at home, and obviously, VegPower's materials are quite focused on doing that. Other programs to get kids interested in healthy eating are available, as you've mentioned. But as a consequence of that, do you think that schools that are looking at this, it rises in the consciousness of the teachers and to an extent of the parents as something that really is worth spending time on? Rather than being, obviously keeping kids safe is the number one priority. Teaching them stuff comes very high too. But do you see the idea of feeding them well and setting them up for life to understand what good food is as rising up the agenda when it is given attention and when materials are there to help it happen?
Yeah, so I think it's also really important to say that you don't want to make it feel as if you're giving schools more work to do.
Yeah.
And I see the approach of integrating it within the curriculum as a really positive way of saying, actually, we're helping you do your job. And I think that, teachers are, they're time poor as well in terms of the amount of stuff they need to know and do. And any little help in terms of just little examples or ideas or suggestions, having those resources available, and because they're fun as well, they're not kind of the ones you go on or you've kind of been taught in, when you were at school. It's actually fun, and you can actually see children engaging. You can see, you can actually see how what you're doing is also achieving the other kind of learning objectives. So we have seen it really work. And what we've seen over the years is that a lot of our schools have done this year on year because they really appreciate, what this can do, both in terms of the learning objectives, but also, our primary role from public health is the health of our population. So we try and hide that word now because we know that can be a bit scary for people, but they do see the changes, the kind of emotional, social impact of healthy eating the right food. That's just there, alongside all the other kind of learning objectives. So it has been well accepted, and I think we'll probably talk about it a bit more, but how do we sustain this? Because I think the other thing schools don't really like is, here today, gone tomorrow. So I think having resources that are available, but also thinking through how do we keep this going is really important.
A bit of a spin on it to make it interesting from one year to the next. But what I'm hearing is that for both teachers and parents, any help has to promise right at the top, it's going to make your life easier. It's going to make your job easier.
Absolutely.
It's going to make it more fun. It's not, you're not doing it to be worthy. You're doing it because it's just everyone's going to enjoy it.
Yeah.
But let's come to you, Claire, because the word that has been raised quite in a focused way by Dan, he doesn't want us to shy away from it. We've got to sort of focus on it. You are a psychologist. I'm sure everyone on the panel has a view on this, as every parent does, but what do you think about the fussiness issue? Can you define and measure it? I mean, we're struggling. I mean, Dan said we want to drill into it. We need some help. We want to find ways to get in and say this strategy or this approach really could make a difference, rather than just blow the whole thing up, which it obviously runs the risk of doing. What do you see as genuinely useful strategies around fussiness for food?
Okay, so I think first of all, what the scientific literature means when they say fussiness might be a bit different to what parents are saying. So in the academic literature, we would refer to food fussiness as a child who eats a limited variety of foods because they have a tendency to refuse numerous either new foods or foods that they have seen lots of times before. Those are your kids who are really fussy. What most parents, I think, are referring to is that their child is up and down from day to day in what quantity they eat, up and down from day to day about whether or not they're interested in something new or something different. They're challenging at meal times. And I think there's a really tricky line to walk whereby that kind of day-to-day fussiness is normal, by which I mean occurs frequently, which is not to say it's something that we shouldn't be looking to tackle head on. We know that children go through this developmental shift in levels of fussiness. When they're newly mobile, they become fearful of new foods because essentially, from an evolutionary point of view, they don't want to poison themselves. So they tend to eat foods which they recognise, foods which are not green or contain bitter compounds which might indicate that something's poisonous. So these are natural things that happen in our children. But we also often hear parents say things like, children's taste buds change as they get older and they'll grow out of it. Well, that's not necessarily true. Your taste buds do not change as you get older. The flavour profiles you can taste under kind of 2 years of age, 1 year of age do. Beyond that, they don't change. These things do not just change naturally and spontaneously. They change through experience and environmental impacts. And what we need to do is support parents to know this is common, but it's not okay. And these are the things that you can do. And some of our research previously has looked at how parental confidence is associated with their use of strategies which we know are positive and really good at helping children to eat more vegetables, like role modelling, like offering them rewards for trying something, not pressuring them to clear a plate or eat a particular quantity, all of these sorts of things. And we know that more confident parents are more happy to use these strategies. The less confident a parent is, the less likely they are to use positive strategies, and in some cases, the more likely they are to use what we call maladaptive strategies, like pressuring their child to eat 2 more bites of that and then you can have some dessert, which we know just backfires. So it's a bit of a minefield, but there are certainly things that parents can do, and I think our role really is to look at how we can support parents to have confidence in the fact there are things they can do. Yes, this happens commonly. Yes, it's natural, but that doesn't mean you can't do anything about it.
I remember an Australian study that highlighted a strategy of, particularly when kids are young, and you mentioned the evolutionary point, that there's a sort of cut-off point where the idea of exploring new foods feels like a risk. And I think it kind of coincides with the physical independence of the child to a certain extent. The tendency to wander off and try stuff comes with a sort of kick in that I better not try something, I better not put something in my mouth if I don't know what it is. But that if you put a lot of different foods in front of kids without taste or eat them when they're really quite small, so like under 2, first foods, that can really open a path for more adventurous eating later on. That's not an easy thing to translate into the family home, though, unless people are, really looking out for very sort of front-footed ways of parenting their small children. When the kids are a little bit older, what are there a couple of things that you could say that we can pass on? I mean, there's a buzz phrase of food hacks, making certain foods taste a little bit more interesting, or I mean, squeezing a little bit of orange juice on some grated carrots, or some kids get quite excited about the flavour of garlic, a little bit of garlic butter on the peas and that kind of thing. Where do you think possible easy wins can be found that can just open the door and I tried that, it didn't work, but I tried that one and it did work?
I think looking at things you can do to make family meal times more enjoyable for parents as well as children, and trying to think about actually, well, what are the biggest barriers to parents doing these things? So if it's because they don't want to disrupt a family mealtime, are there things that they could do actually outside of a mealtime? Could they start by doing something around the snacks that they give their child? Make it so that the stakes are lower. Lots of parents have a fear that their child isn't going to eat enough, and if they don't eat enough, then they won't sleep well, and then they won't have enough energy. But we know that actually children's appetite is a very strong predictor of how much they eat, even if it's a food that might not be their favourite thing. Children are much more likely to try something if they're genuinely hungry, so if we can start thinking about what snacks they're having before meals, how calorific those snacks are, that can help just increase the likelihood of children being willing to try. Ultimately, the thing the science does tell us is that the more times you try something, the more likely you are to like it. Almost any adult you can speak to will be able to tell you an example of a food they didn't like and now they do.
Yeah.
I was about to say one of the best examples of beer and wine, but it doesn't really work when you're talking about 2-year-olds. So we learn to like things through exposure. It's about giving children opportunities around food, and this is where we see the huge disparity between children from families with very low incomes, because they often do not have that ability to have those same food-based experiences. And it's my firm belief that actually often once children start school, they get far fewer food-based experiences. Before they start school, typically parents are very involved in mealtimes, they're sitting with them, they're talking to them, they're encouraging them. Once children start school, mealtimes at school become much more hands-off, children have much greater agency, and of course they're looking to kind of carve their independence. They're being encouraged to do that at every opportunity at school, learn to do this for yourself. And that hands-off nature just means that children are no longer being encouraged to try things. Trying is the biggest win you can get, whatever that looks like. It's not about how much of it they eat, it's about how much of it they try. Because once you like something, you don't have to think about how much of it you eat.
In the VegPower attack, the snack strategy is one part of it is to kind of hijack that tendency of kids to snack while they're doing something else. That thing that they're doing may often involve a screen, and that just does happen. But if kids are quite happy to chomp away at something while they're doing something else, they're often a little bit more relaxed about what that thing is. And if what you put next to them is a bowl of sliced apple or carrots, rather than crisps or extruded wheat-based snacks, they're just going to snack it anyway.
Yeah, and that exact research has been done. Whether you put Skittles, popcorn, or slices of carrot in front of children, if they're watching a cartoon, they will mindlessly eat whatever's in front of them.
So a bit of mindless healthy eating is okay. We can bank that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Kirsty, we've talked about the role of we've touched on the role of retail, and Dan mentioned the West Streeting's shaping up with a bit of policy, which may or may not involve mandatory targets for actually increasing the healthy foods being sold in supermarkets. But whether they're mandatory or not, it seems that the route to getting those sales increases in the good stuff is likely to be left to the supermarkets to find their way, because, as he puts it, they know what works. What can retailers realistically be expected to do, or indeed mandated to do by government, and how important is that side of the story to give parents that better access and better opportunity to bring better food home?
So obviously there's quite a lot in that, but I think that there's many of the retailers in the room here today as well that we work with as members. And actually it sort of would start with the stat that we had a few years ago, which is about 57% of people do want to eat more healthily, eat more fruit and veg. And actually that's a few years old now, so I'd imagine it's really gone up. And I think actually I'd sort of use it though as a parallel really for the industry. I think the industry does want to support the change. And I think there's sort of a few kind of conventionally held wisdoms of, oh, well, if you can only operate that way and drive the change if the demand's there, for example, and actually don't want to heavily influence choice, or indeed the worst case being choice editing. But I think there is an awful lot that has been explored and is now known to support change. So just even as IGD with some members, we've run behaviour change trials over a number of years. Just to give a couple of examples, one with Sainsbury's was around looking at dropping price quite significantly on fruit and veg to around 60p. It was effective for a time, but I think that's also because you have to think, well, that was a time-bound exercise. It wasn't in all stores, and it was also probably done with that category lens. And so I think probably just not to try and sort of do a long walk to answer your question, but I think those behaviour change trials were more from a category lens. There's another example where Healthy Start vouchers were handed out with a £2 voucher to be used on fruit and veg. So that was used by Sainsbury's also. Many other retailers have also had other initiatives, but that was really successful. And I think the example there is because that was almost part of a system. That was something that people were already using with their Healthy Start vouchers. It wasn't within a category and just sort of a structural thing for a period of time. And I think coming on to what some of the retailers are doing at the moment, particularly thinking about the incentives of loyalty cards, rewards of those, but it all being through that loyalty card structure, it's almost about the point of how you drive change. It's how do you put that into and make it frictionless as to what people are already doing. It also drives more of a system or total organisation approach, which I think is really, really valuable, and it does feel that's the way that it's changing. So I suppose to summarise a few things from that, I think it is unfair to probably expect all of it to sit with retailers. I'm not sure it feels actually now it's right to think that there is a railing against mandatory reporting from industry. It actually feels industry is really keen on mandatory reporting. It sets a level playing field, and that is essential. And I think the attitudes around it have changed. Probably we would say separating out mandatory reporting and mandatory targets feels quite important. There's a phasing to be had there. But I think
you can't get mandatory targets without mandatory reporting, can you?
Yes, they are inextricably
it's got to come
linked.
first.
It's a phasing, I think, yes. But it is to say I think there is a lot that retail would like to do more of. There's a lot that they know of what works. And there is a lot of support, I think, for mandatory reporting.
But so just to sort of open that up a little bit, the idea of mandatory reporting, because it's always been a massive issue in another area that I've campaigned around, which is food waste. And you can't really have a conversation about anything to do with mandatory targets until you know what the
baseline.
But the reporting in itself opens up the psychology of public perception of what kind of a supermarket you are and where you're heading and whether you care and stuff like that. That's pretty important to consumers. Mandatory reporting instantly opens up the possibility of a league table. Which now that it's mandatory to reveal how much food you're wasting or how much fruit, vegetable and healthy foods you are selling, who wants to be at the bottom of that list as selling the least, there's straight away an incentive to do more. So can we say, and others on the panel, I mean, Glenys, what do you think? I mean, do we need mandatory reporting so that we can just get that visibility in front of us and start motivating supermarkets to change based on the fact that they're now under scrutiny?
So I think there's always going to be a benefit from mandatory information because everyone's then on the same playing field. We're getting the information in the same way from everybody. And like you say, it means that people are being held to account. We can actually see what's going on, and it is what's going to drive change. That's a reality of it. And actually, when you speak to a lot of people, they want that because actually it helps them all have that commitment together. And I think it is. I know there's lots of nutritionists here who are working within the food industry, and they are there championing all those improvements, and that will give them another lever to be able to help make those improvements within that industry.
Great. Well, I think that's super clear. I mean, that is an absolute baseline thing we need to see. Makes a difference to shoppers, makes a difference to all of us who are campaigning, that we have opportunities to highlight success and motivates supermarkets who already know the strategies, as you've outlined, Kirsty. I mean, they know what works, and much better than anyone else. So reporting plus, then do you think that's going to then inevitably follow that those strategies are going to kick in because they want to be seen to be doing well?
I think, yeah, I suppose it's being seen to be doing well, but I think also try to continue the progress and continue it at a greater pace. So I think it's from a number of different angles, isn't it, that the change could be driven. And I think the other interesting thing from a system point of view, which is the way we're sort of increasingly wanting to look at it, is the cost perspective. So, an awful lot's talked about, isn't it, from the say-do gap from a shopper perspective. It's almost the same as well from a business perspective. So how can you continue to drive the commercial contribution as well from fruit and veg, and for it to not just be seen as like the slightly more challenging category that doesn't have the same margin as the others. So I think that is a really that's another quite key type of conversations to be having at a system level.
Bimpi, I don't imagine that mandatory targets for veg consumption are high on the sort of strategy list for you, but I mean, Lambeth really has been blazing a trail for success with healthier eating in schools, and I just wondered if you could just tell us one or two of the individual stories of the getting to a sort of personal, anecdotal level, coming back from the schools as to what's helped and what the upsides of it are, and whether that's something that, if it's then communicated in the right way, can help other schools follow.
Yeah. So I probably won't name the school or the person either in the school, but I think it's also really interesting because some of our younger teachers were in that group where they didn't have those cooking lessons in their own time, and for them actually this has been a real challenge, just in terms of I can't even do it for myself, how much more talk to kids or their parents. And I think it was the opportunity to understand as well some of the ways in which you can work with fruit and veg. You don't have to be a chef. You don't have to make all these brilliant meals. There are so many different ways in which you can do it. And I think that in itself, is something so simple as actually, this is not as hard. You think of fruit and veg and you think, oh my goodness, what am I going to do with it? And just dispelling that was almost like, just unveiling a whole new way of eating fruit and vegetables, which of course you can communicate to children as well, because you recognize that, whether it's, getting them to chop things up and, using some other kind of skills to chop things up or to play games. And it was just, I think actually, probably more for the teachers, it was quite a revelation to them.
There is a natural and infectious excitement and enthusiasm to do almost anything with fruit and vegetables if there isn't the pressure to actually eat them. But that familiarity, that handling, that seeing something new, talking about its shape, having a conversation about where it came from and how it was grown. I mean, that's education, and it's easy for anyone to deliver, any teacher, even if they don't have the confidence or the skills to come at it from a cooking or kitchen point of view. I'm just Dan referenced Taste Ed, a fantastic program in schools, and I just wonder if I think there's at least one or two people from Taste Ed, and I just wonder if would you mind just not, you don't have to come and sit, but would you, if I give you a microphone, I wonder if you would just take a minute, if I can ambush you, just to say a little bit about exactly what Bimpi's touched on there, and how to just get this whole thing going from first principles with kids in schools. Can you just say your name and tell us a little bit about Taste Ed and how it works?
Yeah, of course. I'm Fran, so I'm from Taste Ed. I don't know how to get the whole thing going, but I can talk a little bit about what we do. And a lot of actually what Claire was saying spoke really strongly to how we work. So for us, we work with schools to help them introduce fruits and vegetables into the classroom. What we've seen is a lot of food education has been quite theoretical, so children learning what they should be eating, knowing the 5-a-day campaign, and then sometimes jumps to cooking, but what we're not getting is that building of familiarity. So Taste Ed is we're basically lessons linked to the curriculum where children are introduced to fruits and vegetables using their senses. So it might be the sense of sight, where they look at lots of different types of peppers, or we do a lesson about crunchy food, so it's let's get loads of different fruits and vegetables and figure out which is the crunchiest by either cutting it or opening it up, and it's building that familiarity you're talking about and giving children the chance to taste things.
A chance to taste things, but not the obligation to taste things.
Pressure-free, and what you said about trying it can be smelling it, it could be licking it, it could be just looking at it. And sometimes we've had teachers say that the child stood outside the classroom because they know it's food, a food lesson, and they don't want to come in. And we say, you don't have to try the food, you don't have to like it. And then you see them, it's playful, you just get to look at it, you get to listen to a piece of celery, and then you see their confidence grow, and they get to have that first chance to try celery when they've never had it at home. And what we saw also was definitely teachers' anxiety around teaching food. We were at a university teaching BEd students, so our future teachers, and there were people that they were so anxious around food, they didn't want to try it. And
anxious, yeah.
Yeah, someone who's going to be a teacher, and they'd never tried an apple before. I don't know what the reason was, but if they're then having to teach our future children about what fruits and vegetables are, there's a lot of nervousness, and if they're expected to cook a meal in front of children, that can be really anxiety-inducing. So how do we give teachers really easy ways to introduce fruits and vegetables into the classroom that's fun, that's joyful, that's giving them that first opportunity to try? Yeah.
We keep coming back to fun and joyful and easy, and the removal of pressure, using it to make something to make your life easier in the classroom. We're going to open this up now. We've got 10 minutes, maybe a couple more than that, to have questions or indeed contributions from anybody here. It's been an amazing session. We've had really, really great insights, and I think we all get a collective sense of where all this intervention needs to be heading. What's positive? Anyone else like to chip in a thought? Anything we've missed, or anything you'd like to ask the panel? And we've got a roving mic. We'll start here because you're right. What would you like to say?
So, can you hear me?
Yes. Can you tell us who you are quickly?
My name's Kim Smith. I'm a PhD researcher for food education at City University, and also one of the Taste Ed crew. I'm actually going to talk about this as a parent. I've got 2 teenage boys, and one of the things that really struck me is that through my experience at Taste Ed, I have learned how normal, like you say, Claire, this kind of progression and this development of food preferences is. I've been working in the food system for 25 years. I've done a lot of kind of food education things. I've learned a lot of food stuff myself. I didn't know that. And I really think there is a huge opportunity to support parents like the NCT childbirth thing does, but afterwards it's kind of like you've had the baby, off you go. And like that weaning stuff is really not supported, and we've got lots of mothers now going to work and relying on nurseries. The nurseries aren't supported, the earlier sector is really struggling. And it just feels like there's a really, really big missing kind of support piece, like the NCT, to just go, this is really normal. Like the amount of parents I talk to when I do Taste Ed who are like, oh, I didn't know this was normal. It's like my teenager's now going through secondary school and he's become fussy again. And it's just really normal. And I think there's a huge piece, and there seems to be like a place for an organisation or something to actually train parents in how to navigate this.
Welcome to the club. You're not alone. It's
Absolutely,
a really,
yeah.
really important message. Thank you very much. I want to look to the wings here because we've got people all over the place. We've got, yes, we know, you know who you want to ask. I don't, so let's,
hello.
Hi. And then behind you there, lady with the glasses after that, if we can do that, yes.
Hi, it's Stephanie Slater from School Food Matters. It's really great to hear from Tasted. And I also just want to talk a little bit about language. So we've shifted at School Food Matters from talking about picky and fussy eaters to cautious eaters, because it just tends to take the blame away and the negativity away. And we talk about moving children from being cautious eaters to courageous eaters. And it's a bit, it becomes a challenge and brings that fun element in too, without the sort of weight of blame. So I'm just wondering if anybody else has tried that and if it's working for you.
That's very interesting. I mean, don't take the mic, because I just want to ask you something about that specifically. So we're saying we're not going to skirt around the issue of fussiness. We're going to take it head on. And we almost might be saying we're not afraid of the F word, but you are asking us to exercise caution and indeed look at that very word as a way to reframe it in a way that might make it less stressful for parents. You would actually say, just be careful about that word. Don't say, it's time to accept that kids are fussy and not be frightened about the F word. You say, maybe that's not quite the right path.
Well, in our minds, we think caution is, you gave the example of Australia, but caution is a positive thing, and being courageous is a very positive thing. And somebody else used the word about fear.
Yeah.
If children are frightened, that's an emotion you don't want them to have to carry around food, which should be joyful and fun. So we're just having a go with it, and I just wondered if anybody else has tried, switching the language a bit.
If anyone else got a comment on that, I'd love to hear it. It just brings us back to what you were saying, Claire. I mean, caution is a way of describing that evolutionary force that kicks in, that does make children wary of new foods, and particularly when they've got freedom of movement. They're not being fussy, they're being cautious or even frightened. Anything quick on that before we go to the next question?
Absolutely, but I think what I would be inclined to say is let's ask parents. Let's ask parents what they think and what they like. And I'd be certainly happy to do some research on that. And I think it's also worth thinking about whether or not we're talking to children or parents, and it might be that there's different words that are appropriate for different audiences. Children shouldn't be told they're fussy. You can reinforce that behaviour. We've got a terrible habit as well of children trying something on one day and saying, oh, you don't like carrots, rather than you don't like this carrot. Because let's be honest, they vary, and some carrots are naff. So I think it's just trying to avoid those broad brush categories for children.
Time is tight, but there was yes, thank you. Can you just tell us who you are?
Hi, I'm Leanna Court from the School of Arts and Food. We work with secondary students doing lots of different things, and we've worked with Tasted as well. And I was just wondering whether the panel thinks that there's any work where we should be broadening into older students as well, because often we focus our attention on the younger ones, and then there's this kind of idea with parents especially, and people we've been speaking to, that maybe they think it's too late now, they haven't done enough when they're young. And in our experience, we know that that's not the case, and we can work with secondary students and really change their opinion. So I wondered if there's anywhere that we need to think about that as well.
I'm really glad you brought that up, and it's probably going to be the last point that we drill into. There's absolutely a feeling that teenagers are harder to reach, and the older they get, well, let's move on to the younger ones, because we might make some progress. Glenys, on that.
Yeah, and I think it's absolutely an age group we do need to look at and help, particularly because we've lost the A level for those who were passionate. So now they might get GCSE and then there's nothing. How do we keep that enjoyment for them? How do we get them to realise that actually there is something that they can go on to do? Because actually now we've lost that A level, we've lost a golden opportunity to reach those who were passionate about it, which then actually spreads to their peers.
It's also a moment in time where the issue of nutrition moves to an issue of opportunity in the world of actually being creative with food and a world that's actually open to kids who in other areas may be struggling especially. So yeah.
And I think it's very important to remember that adolescents and young people are those who are most engaged on social media. They are the ones being most let down by our food system and our food environments, and they're the ones that we should be thinking about when we start talking about social media campaigns. It's not just parents. What do we want to say to those young people?
Well, that's a great way forward to... Sheila Dillon is waving her hand. I think she probably shouldn't be ignored.
Well, it's not kind of you not to ignore me, because I know we're right at the end. But the question of fussiness, I am the grandmother of two... I was horrified to be the grandmother of two extremely fussy small children, 3 and 7. And I was a bit skeptical about this, but they moved to France. And so these horribly fussy children, you know, just wouldn't eat veg, and they're just appalling, but marvelous, but appalling. Anyway, they moved to France. School has a set menu. It's there for, you know, it's the standard French thing, 3 courses. That's what you get. You sit with everybody. You eat that meal day after day. And a year and a half, I mean, it didn't take a year and a half, but a year and a half afterwards, they are transformed children by school meals. Yeah. Because they have lovely food every single day, and there isn't a choice, and all their chums eat the same thing. I mean, it's like we're pretending that fussy, you know, that these bigger things, the bigger environment is not a very profound element of fussiness.
It brings us back to a key thing that I don't mind talking about for 1 minute, even though it's not particularly on today's agenda. But I mean, we did see a piece of government action earlier in the year where 500,000 kids approximately will now be offered free school meals. It raises the question of whether the meals actually put in front of them will really do any good. But I think it does reinforce the idea that what happens at school, as Bimpy has said, is an amazing chance to change the life and outcomes of our children. And my particular worry about the gesture that's been made is it will be seen as more than enough for now that we've done this thing. And what we would love to see is actions like this, and what also has happened in London with all primary age kids getting free school meals, the collection of the kind of data that would prove unambiguously that this really does work. But that data does need to be linked, as you point out, to some knowledge about what was actually on the plate in front of those kids, so that we can see what was effective in making that happen. It's definitely on the wider agenda, and I think everybody, I mean, a lot of us in this room will go on shouting for those kind of changes and making them, pushing them up the political agenda as best we can. To the panel, thank you so much for fantastic insights into this issue and some excellent contributions from the floor as well. Dan, you need to, it's not lunch yet, is it? It's just, no. But the panel, please thank the panel warmly for me.
And Food Task Force is that successful interventions require a fully inclusive design that encourages joint participation between parents and children, offering reward to both. Rather than being seen as possible sources of conflict, these initiatives must be perceived as having high potential to strengthen family bonds during meals. We believe gamification can be a powerful strategy to accomplish this. I'm going to go a step further. I do like to chuck a controversial statement out there. So here's my controversial statement. For years, we've talked about making the healthy choice the easy choice, and I think that's a mistake. Because the moment you say you're trying to make it easy, is what you're doing is acknowledging that it's hard. And what we're hearing from parents is that easy just isn't good enough. What we have to do is to make the healthy choice the joyful choice, the bonding choice, the choice you want to do because it's a better path to follow. And I think, you know, I was trying to say, well, why does eat them, defeat them work? I'd like to think we knew what we were doing at the beginning, but we're kind of finding out what we did afterwards. Is eat them, defeat them works because it's just a whole bunch of fun, right? And so we are trying now to really bake into all our design that says, is this seen as a game to play, a joy to bring, a togetherness to bond, or is it seen as a chore to do? Because if what we're suggesting they do is ever perceived to be a difficult thing to do, then we've got it wrong and we need to rethink. So I think it's time to bench, make the healthy choice the easy choice. I think it's a mistake in terms of thinking. Now, thank you very much to our panel who helped us today, to our task force who's helped us on this work, and to all the people who contributed. We are absolutely blessed, at least I'm absolutely blessed, to be surrounded by amazing people. Not least